Do you think in words or symbols? Many people believe that they think in words, that their thoughts that they consist of nothing but words. But I would argue that most people simply misunderstand what they are really thinking and what words really are. To get a better idea of it, consider your true thoughts, your innermost thoughts. When you really consider something, think about something deeply, when you get an image in your head, it's multifaceted and multi-layered, isn't it? It's not just a simple collection of words. You don't think in terms of full sentences. When you imagine, if I ask you to imagine something, say an octopus in the ocean, and it's being hunted by a shark. And the octopus releases its ink and creates a cloud of ink, and the shark is unable to see the octopus, and the octopus is able to escape. That may seem like a really strange example, but what I'm getting at is, you may wonder, or someone who thinks in literal words, who simply thinks in sentences, if such a person indeed existed, might think that, oh, well, how can the octopus not be seen by the shark? Can't the shark just see the octopus around the other side of the ink cloud as it tries to escape? But that's not how the human mind processes things. The human mind, although you may not realize it, implicitly considers all these different factors and all these different elements of the situation that's being discussed that aren't necessarily expressed in any words or any form of language. Your mind thinks and understands, even if you're not aware of it, it thinks about the circumstances of the scenario. Like, how long does the octopus have to distract the shark before it can escape? And how long does the octopus have to swim before it can escape from the shark? And things like this. The fact that the ink cloud doesn't fully conceal the octopus in a three-dimensional space like the ocean, like an expansive ocean of open water, these things are just, your mind processes and understands these things and sort of gets a deeper understanding of what has to happen and what will happen in this image, in this scenario that I'm presenting, without having to go through it word by word or, in the form of sentences. That would be insane. If someone had to process this complex situation in words and sentences, literally speaking, then it would take forever. It would take hours. You would have to just go through it and process the situation word by word and end up having to think the equivalent of 20 pages of text, of words, of written language. But our minds are able to process and understand this complex situation instantly. Whether or not we understand it, we're aware of it in the moment, we think about these things. We understand the three-dimensionality of the scenario, and we think about all these different three-dimensional factors and the psychology of these different animals that are being talked about, and we understand these things and we think about these things on a level that goes much deeper than language. Some people think that they believe that they think in words. They believe that thought is equivalent to language, but it isn't. Language is the means by which we express our thoughts to other people. Language is the tool that we use to translate our innermost thoughts, to make an approximation of them, and in so doing, to share our thoughts with other people as best as we can within the limitations of language. Because language is ultimately a somewhat clumsy tool compared to the the sublime exactitude of human thought. We can't perfectly express ourselves and make ourselves perfectly understood in terms of what we think and feel on our innermost level. It's difficult, if not impossible, to express that completely to another person through language. We can try and do our best, but it's like trying to illustrate a really detailed, trying to draw a blueprint with finger paints, I suppose, might be a way of thinking of it. It's just we can do our best, but on some level, we can never fully make ourselves perfectly understood to another person through language. And but language is priceless. It is what allows us to communicate so well among each other, even acknowledging that it's not perfect. We're still able to communicate with other human beings on a level that no other animal is capable of. Even though some of them do possess language in a sense, ours is so much more sophisticated and developed, and we are so much more attuned to it that we are able to communicate far better than any other living organism. But when people believe that they are thinking in words, I would implore them to look deeper and consider that what you think, you may have an inner monologue. I think we all do that. We all discuss things with ourselves. We all sort of have a running monologue, dialogue, however you want to think of it. It may vary from person to person, but we all use language to process things within our own minds. That's true. Some people, I think, hear this and they maybe misunderstand what relationship exactly that has to thought, because the human mind does not think in terms of language. The human mind thinks in thoughts. The human mind considers things in an infinitely complex, multifaceted, fluid, mutable storm of concepts and ideas and words. Words are mixed in there as well. But imagine a thought, some complex thought that you've had about a complex situation with a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different facets to it, and something that would be difficult and time-consuming, if not impossible, to fully describe to another person using language. Think about that. And think about what sort of, if you had to give that thought pattern an image, if you had to imagine it having a sort of physical shape, a three-dimensional shape, and then imagine putting that on a piece of paper, and then think about how that piece of paper is vastly more succinct and, in a sense, simple, in the sense of its expression, not necessarily of its content. But think about how much clearer that thought pattern is when simply put to paper. I'm not saying that it literally could be put to paper, but just think of the best approximation you could. And then think about trying to express that same thing, that same thought pattern in text, writing it down. Trying to write it down would almost certainly consume hundreds of pages, and it would go on and on and on. It would take forever, and it would be trying to limit yourself to a strictly linear beginning and end kind of format using nothing but words is going to be an ordeal compared to the perfect simplicity and just pure essence of the concept, of the thought pattern, when put as an image, put to paper, held in your mind as a thought and as nothing else, not trying to translate it, not trying to force it into shapes that it doesn't necessarily naturally consist of, but just as it is in its native form, as it is in its natural environment within your mind, within the privacy of your own mind. Thinking of it in those terms, I think it becomes clear that, and I'm not saying that everyone necessarily thinks in these terms. Everyone is different to a degree, and there's infinite diversity in the sense of the human mind and how exactly people process things and how people perceive the world. But I think most people do this without necessarily realizing it. I think it's common to think, to imagine the world, or imagine how we perceive the world as being expressed internally as language in words, but when we really think about it, we are translating our thoughts into words without even thinking about it, because it's so natural, because we all grew up learning language, and we all learned to speak among our earliest memories, if not, before we started forming permanent memories, and we all are so comfortable with language. Language is such a part of what it means to be human that we don't necessarily think about it in on these deeper levels. We don't necessarily think about what we are doing with it as we are doing it. It's just, it can be more of something we do reflexively. We do it as second nature. We do it out of habit because we are just so accustomed to it. And so it's easy to think of language as being how we think, but it isn't. Our thoughts are translated into language, into words, and then we use that approximated thought pattern as represented by words and by language as a means of transmitting that thought, that original thought, to another person, to other people, so that they can have a glimpse of what is going on inside our own minds, inside our own mind, rather. And I suppose this may not be a great example, or a comparison, but it would be like if someone grew up always wearing clothes and was never naked, and they began to think that clothing was their skin, because they just had no understanding that clothing was something that we developed as we developed human society, human civilization, as we progressed and became more sophisticated in our social organization and technology. We created these things to improve our quality of life and to protect ourselves and to share our thoughts and ideas, but they aren't necessarily. A shirt is no more one skin than the word hello is the thought of greeting. They are affectations that we don because they help us, and they should be respected and appreciated, but we should also appreciate and respect what we really are deep down. We should appreciate and respect the fact that our thoughts are always infinitely more beautiful than the words we use to express them. Words can be beautiful. Language can be a magnificent thing that can create and express extraordinary beauty. It is priceless. It should be respected immensely, and I certainly don't mean to demean it or impugn it in any way, but rather to put it in its place and restore respect to our true thoughts, who we really are, the way that our minds genuinely and authentically process the world. Because only by doing so can we truly free ourselves from the restrictions and the limitations that are unfortunately imposed by language. Language helps us a great deal, but it also constrains us, and it can unfortunately limit what we are capable of. If one is bound by language, if one allows themselves to think that language is the mode in which the human mind operates fundamentally, then it will be all too easy to become confused and lost and disturbed by the world, because no language, no matter how excellent, can express reality perfectly. Every language is flawed, and even if simply flawed by the fact that it is an approximation of human thought and is not reality itself. Words are simply an expression of reality and not reality itself. Do not think that do not be limited by words and think that if you don't have a word to describe something that you think or feel, then it doesn't exist. Nothing could be further from the truth. Rather, that is a call to simply create a new word, to create new words, to perhaps even a whole new language, to try to express these things. Because what you think and feel, even if it can't be expressed in words, that is real. That is what you are truly thinking and feeling. Haven't we all had those moments, to varying degrees, of feeling things, thinking things that we can't necessarily process and translate into language, at least not without a great deal of effort, of time, of really trying to think about how to express it in language. But when we're thinking and feeling it, it's self-evident, it's completely clear, it is what it is. We think it, we feel it, we understand it implicitly, and we know what it is. And so, if one is too slavishly devoted to the idea of language as being reality rather than just a means of expressing reality, then that might lead you down the wrong path and might lead you to think that the thoughts and feelings that you can't express in words, that they are less than legitimate, but they are. They are the legitimate thing. They are reality. They are what you think and feel. And language is the imposter. I don't mean that in to condemn language. More of just a language is the guest. Language is the guest to the party. Language is the tool that we use to communicate. It is not the master. It is not who we really are. We are not subservient to language. Language is subservient to human beings. If people might sublimate their own thoughts and feelings, and they might crush down what they think and feel if they think and feel that it can't be expressed in existing language. And that would be a terrible tragedy, because that would mean sacrificing a great deal of who you truly are, to an artifice, to something that we created to serve our purposes, language, something that is there to allow us to communicate, not to govern our thoughts and feelings, not to tell us what we may think or feel, but to allow us to express what we do think and feel. Language is nothing but an approximation of what we really are and what the world really is. Don't let it guide you. You must guide language. If we sacrifice any part of who we are, because we think it doesn't fit in with existing language, with existing means of expression, with existing concepts that are always evolving and changing. If we refuse to help that process and create new language, create new words to express what we think and feel, and alter language as necessary to allow ourselves to think, to express our thoughts and feelings better, and ultimately to drive home the point that we are what we are, and language is just the means by which we express that true nature to one another. If we don't take hold of our own minds and the tools that we use to express what springs from those minds, then we will become less human. Well, we will not become more human by trying to fit in with the pre-existing conditions of language. We will become less. We will give up the best parts of ourselves in service to something that has no soul of its own. Language does not think. Language does not feel. Language is nothing. Language exists only in the hearts and minds of human beings. And if we don't recognize that our thoughts are above and beyond language, that they are infinitely more beautiful and more perfect and more expressive than language could ever be, then we have no recourse but to shame. And I will not be ashamed. I will not allow myself to be limited by language. I will not worship language. Language is a tool, a beautiful tool. It is something to be respected and valued. But it is not our master. Language does not define who we are. We define who we are, and we define what language is.